This is an RPGaDay response from the Casting Shadows blog. Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, welcome to day 10 of RPGaDay. We are now almost 1/3 of the way through the month and 1/3 of the way through our questions. Today's question is kind of a fun one. What has been the largest or biggest in-game surprise that you have experienced? And until this past week, I would have given you a completely different answer. And while this answer isn't exactly what I had in mind with this question, I hope that you'll enjoy listening to it as much as I'm excited to talk about it. Okay. Day 10. For part of July and August this year, I have the great pleasure to be involved in running what basically amounts to a creative writing class. And based on experiences I've had before and successes I've had before, I knew that I needed to include role-playing in this class. And there's a lot of reasons for this which are not really germane to this video. But let's say that the freedom, the exploration, the imagination involved in running a role-playing session is a great way to jumpstart a hesitant writer's confidence in their ability to be creative, in their ability to imagine. And while we do present different tools for how to consider the generation of ideas, how to consider the experience of the reader, and so on and so forth, a good portion of the game is spent in what looks like play. They are playing through scenarios. They are adopting the roles of characters. They are learning how to be game masters, and then turning that experience around to be able to apply the various pushes and pulls of preparation and spontaneity, and see if they can recapture that feeling when they set down to write whatever it is that they're looking to write. So this class has been a real treat for me. I sometimes think of it as GMing 101, although that's not its purpose, but it's a pleasant side effect. But the big surprise, other than the usual surprises of seeing which people choose to play what types of characters in which ways, that's always surprising. What has been surprising has been what has manifested as play this time. In the past, when I've done this, I've presented a very simple method of role play, sometimes with dice, sometimes without, sometimes with rules, sometimes without. And then we've stuck to it. Right, so that people could learn those things, they could navigate through scenes with confidence in those things and then move forward. The role play was really the thing. This time, while I did establish a pretty robust framework for resolving scenes and dealing with interactions, I also didn't really explain how to use it. Now, in the past, I've always done this. This time, I explained what the rules are, but I didn't explain how to apply them. I did give an example session of about an hour in length where there were a lot of rolls and there were a lot of resolutions to make, but I didn't really explain anything, and I did this on purpose. And the result has been pretty interesting. None of the students involved in the course have any real experience with role-playing of this type, or even of a type that involves another person. They really didn't know what to expect, and the dice were strange, and the idea of a character sheet was strange. But as we began to make the first ties between the traits on the character sheet and the traits involved in establishing character, establishing scene, establishing mood and atmosphere and this sort of thing, they quickly began to relax. They quickly could see what it was for. So on the very second day of class, when I randomly picked students to become game masters, I thought maybe there would be more hesitation or surprise, but they were raring to do what I had done the day before, which was run a session. They weren't really sure how to prepare for it. I helped them there, and in the background, the other students were generating characters, and I helped them with that, answering questions about system, answering questions about how play would run. Questions of genre, and like, should we know each other or not know each other, stuff like that. And most of these I would just answer with a question. Well, what would you like? And what do you think would be a good idea? And so on. And sometimes tying that back into writing and sometimes not. And they had about an hour to get ready. So imagine going from not knowing you're going to be the game master to learning you're going to be the game master and then running your very first game ever all within the space of an hour. And then having an hour and about 10 minutes to run that session with, armed with nothing but some percentile dice, a pencil, and a small notebook, and a pad of graph paper. That's the kind of fire I threw them in from the frying pan of the class. And a mild surprise, a nice surprise, was how well they've taken to it. We've gotten through half of the class at the date of recording, and everybody is taking to it. Some are really stellar, and some are just good. There haven't been any bad ones yet, and I don't think there will be, because we've already had the most shy, most afraid of speaking, most afraid to share their writing. That was the very first game master chosen. A little bit of manipulation on my part, perhaps, but regardless, that person has already gone and been wonderful, which caused a real strong effect on the rest of the class. But what I'm laboring toward is the biggest surprise. And the biggest surprise has been how many different styles of play have manifested naturally based on the understanding of the rules. They all went through the same play experience together. And yet, when moved into the Game Master's chair and when moved into a different session, their interpretation of how to recreate that is very different. Two groups running games side by side, both interpreting roles completely differently. It has been an amazing surprise. I thought at least there would be a stronger connection between these groups, but in much the same way that we receive things like, early D&D box sets, or your first role-playing game, whatever it was, and you went off by yourself and read it and then had to coax your friends into playing it and then had to take those written rules and turn them into an actual experience without ever having seen anything like it. These students went through one play experience, were handed some dice, and then asked to run and play in a session. I thought what was produced would be closer to what had been modeled. And that's the biggest surprise. It was tied more closely to how they see writing than how they saw gameplay. So, I have seen groups invent opposed roles. I didn't show them opposed roles. I didn't even mention them. But they felt that a use of perceptive ability to encounter someone who was actively hiding, this deserves some kind of roll-off. So they invented opposed roles on the spot. They also, as they continued to play, really got into the interplay. Everything needed a role, and every single thing was roll-worthy. It was interesting. While right next to them, happening at the same time, was a group of people who were rolling only for the most enormous amounts of time. In roughly an hour and 10 minutes, one group entered a building, climbed a flight of stairs, entered a room, and had a combat. While at the same time, another group traveled around their fantasy nation, held very important high-level diplomatic talks with the leaders of these different factions, traveled with an ever-growing army of fantasy creatures, and assembled a war host to resist the depredations of an evil queen. And they got up to the point of the final conflict with the evil queen, with just a handful of rolls having been made to determine broad areas of success and failure. They kept referencing the sheets diligently to see what the players could do, looking at the percentages that were recorded there and deciding, I think you can do that. They invented the automatic success, or the ratio of what you should be able to do at a certain percentage ability. They invented that on their own and decided that rolls were only for pivotal events within the story. Very pivotal events in the story. And they felt that, I guess, that they were engaged in a short story. They weren't beginning some kind of epic 20-book novelization of a fantasy world. They were going to deal with a fantasy battle in an afternoon. And I think this is fascinating. Neither group produced in play what had been modeled, using the exact same tools. It says a lot about our hobby, how diverse it has become, how and why perhaps we argue when we think we should be agreeing. Tremendous and exciting diversity. And who knows what's ahead of us in the hobby. So this was my great and rewarding surprise. Now, on to the next day. Share your thoughts with us. If you're not sure how to share, the simplest way is to post the way that you normally do, video or text or tweet or what have you, and tag it with RPGaDay, hashtag RPGaDay. Or share it on brigadecon.org. Our pull-down menu has a handy submission form.